And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio. So thank you for joining me on this bitterly cold, late January Friday night. Of course, that's as you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, which you can find all of our live shows on now, both YouTube and Facebook. So please like our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page, and you can check us our live shows out there. But if you're listening on one of our audio platforms, maybe it's a Saturday and it's nice and sunny where you are in the world, but you can catch all of our podcasts on whether it's live or audio only on any audio platform. And we have a variety of podcasts, both live and audio only, including this show, the Steelers Hangover, the Scobro Show, the Curtain Call, which used to be the Know Your Enemy, hosted by Michael Beck and Jeffrey Benedict on Wednesday nights. Now it's the Curtain Call. We have, let's see if I'm missing any. I'm sure I am. The Touchdown Under Show with Maddie Peverall and Mark Davison, the guys from Australia. I finally got their names right. There's Mark Davison right there in the live chat. So there you go. Perfect timing. Then we have our audio-only shows, including the Retro Show with me and Brian Anthony Davis. We have the Live Mic with Michael Beck, the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, and I think that just about covers it. I'm sure there's some others out there. There's so many. Oh yeah, there's the Cap Room. That's a new one. That's where one of the Australian blokes, and forgive me which one for not knowing which one. Every week I always forget something about those guys, but it's a new show where they discuss the Steelers' very complicated and intricate cap situation, which is always both of those things every year, especially this year. So please check that out. Check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website where we bring you countless articles each and every day. There's every time something happens, every time we're all in this Slack app, the whole Behind the Steel Curtain writing and podcasting team. And every time something happens, I look down and I see somebody saying, "We got it. I got it. You want it? I'll take it." That's either Dave Schofield, Jeff Hartman, or Michael Beck. They're always on top of everything. So please check that out. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. So I want to welcome everybody to the live chat. There's George Teston, as I said, Mark Davidson, Felicia Ballard, Alex Dingy. I like that. Reminds you of All in the Family. You Dingbat. But if that's not how you pronounce your name, I'm sorry. It reminds me of All in the Family regardless. Jared Devil, John Moore, Gyro, Dean McRae, the 1R1. I don't know what that means, but it seems pretty cool. Seems like it would be like a DJ name. So welcome to everybody. And as always, I have a few topics I wanted to discuss. And here we are, 3 weeks into the offseason, and the news never seems to stop with this team. And here's a quick question from Yeti. How are you tonight, Tony? I'm fine. I have to go back to work tomorrow. This is like my Sunday night, so I'm not too happy about that. But before I know it, it'll be next Wednesday, and which is my Friday. That's what I do now on my new job. I count days because, like a lot of people out there, I'm living the dream. So I'm doing fine. So thank you for asking. But the first topic I wanted to discuss was Art Rooney II, the team president's annual conference with the media, which he held on Thursday. And he did discuss many things, mainly the Steelers' financial situation, especially as it pertains to quarterback Ben Roethlisberger and the $41 million price tag that his contract is, or at least how much of that counts against the cap. And right after the season ended, there was obviously speculation as to whether or not Ben Roethlisberger would come back next year. He's 38. He'll be 39 in about a month. And the fact that the Steelers are so cap strapped, and the fact that they're going to owe him $19 million as it currently stands, of that $41 million. I don't know if people know this. I have a hard time with the cap too, but I finally got this part down. I think it's like 21 or 22 million or 21.5 or whatever. They can't do anything about that. That's dead money. That's what dead money means. You can't revive dead money, right? You can't revive a well, I'm not going to say that, but you can't revive dead money. So that $22 million, there's nothing they can do about that. But the $19 million, that's something that they can fix either through a pay cut or a contract extension or restructuring of some sort. So people were wondering if the Steelers would just move on from Ben and pocket that $19 million, or if he would retire and allow them to pocket that $19 million, or if he would come back next year, or if they would welcome him back. Well, Art II kind of he shed some light on that on Thursday by saying that the Steelers do want Ben to come back next year. They're open to that possibility, but he can't come back under his current contract because it's just too much of a financial liability for them with their current situation. I think as of last week, they were like $29 million over. I don't know what it is right now. It changes daily, I guess. I didn't really check that. I was checking other salary cap things, but not the Steelers' latest situation. But whatever it is, it's going to take a lot of work to get into compliance, and that's exactly what he said. But he did say he's open to Ben coming back. And for his part, Ben, at least according to Ed Bichette, of The Athletic, a longtime Steelers insider, he said that he texted Ben, and Ben said he wants to come back, and he'll do whatever he can to help the Steelers in their current situation. So at least now we know that not only does Ben want to come back, but the Steelers are open to him coming back. It's just a matter of can they work everything out as far as the contract. And I have no doubt that they're going to come to a compromise, because if the Steelers were ready to move on from Ben, I think they would have done so by now, or you would have heard rumblings of that, right? I mean, if they thought he was done and washed up, or washed, as the cool kids say nowadays, if they thought that Ben had nothing left to give, why would they bring him back at any price, even a pay cut, even a straight up hard line? We want you to take a pay cut, not an extension, but why would they bring him back if they thought he had nothing left to give, right? Like I said last week, you don't need a 39-year-old quarterback who's washed up to help you through a rough patch if you think that's where you're headed as an organization. So I think if they thought that he was done and they had no chance of competing with him or without him, they wouldn't ask him to come back. They would politely ask him to retire or do the unthinkable and release him, right? So I think what's going to happen is the obvious answer is they're gonna extend his contract. All they can really manipulate is that $19 million. So if they can extend him through maybe another 3 years, even if he only plays one more year, and maybe a third of that $19 million counts against the cap as dead money each year through 21, 22, through 2023, I think that's their best bet. You know, I'm no capologist. I don't know exactly how this stuff works, but I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to restructure. He'll still get his $19 million, but it'll just be prorated over the next few years. I'm sure that you can't just restructure a contract without adding any money to it. At least that's my understanding. So they'll probably give him a small raise, nothing significant, or a small bonus or whatever, and that's how they'll rework it. And I don't know how you guys feel about it. Actually, I know how a lot of you feel about it, but I'm happy. I'm not going to lie. I'm happy. I know a lot of people want them to move on from him. They want him to retire. They think he's done. But I'm still a fan of the players, and this guy is so special to me as a player. I realize that he's never been really the closest. He's never really gotten close with the fans like some other players have. Maybe that's a franchise quarterback thing. I've only lived through two of them, Bradshaw and him. So I don't know how that, works. Maybe they can't really get close to the fans like other position players can. I don't know, but it doesn't matter to me. I just appreciate what he's done on the field and what he's done for the organization since 2004. And in many ways, I think he's the best player that they've ever had. I know it's going to sound blasphemous to some people because, Joe Green and Terry Bradshaw and Jack Lambert and you name them. There's so many you can Rod Woodson, my goodness, Rod Woodson, but I just think he's such a gifted player for them. He's obviously not in his prime anymore, but just the fan in me wants to see him come back and give it another go because I just think he's a special talent, a unique talent, and there have been very few quarterbacks, excuse me, throughout the history of the NFL who can do what Ben has been able to do. The combination of mobility and arm strength and accuracy and the desire to make things happen when a play breaks down and not just run for 20, 30 yards or whatever, but to scramble around in the pocket and out of the pocket and look for receivers downfield. I just think he has such a unique skill set that we might, you just don't see what the kind of things that he could do in his prime. So I still think he has a lot left, and I want to see him play another year, maybe even two. So that part of me is happy about that. But the other part is I think the more logical part is I think he gives them the best chance to win of the quarterbacks on their roster right now. He gives them the best chance to compete next year. Mason, the opinions on Mason Rudolph are so funny because, either he has no shot of being anything or people are like, oh, he was good against Cleveland. So I'm very optimistic about him. And I think he could be the man. There's no in between with that guy. But, chances are he'll be an above average quarterback. So, why people are eager to get to that phase of Steelers history, I don't know. I mean, I just think so many people are just in today's world with social media and maybe it's that fantasy football mentality, but people are so quick to want to move on from players. And I realize it's weird saying quick for a guy that's been here for 17 years and who's closing in on 40 really fast. But, once you move on from a guy like that, there's no turning back. I know a lot of people think it's like snapping your finger to get another quarterback. And when you have all these other quarterbacks who are requesting trades and maybe in bad situations, you think, all right, they're going to get those guys and bring them in. But, looking at the numbers, I don't know if it's going to be that easy. Like, for example, who is it? Carson Wentz. I think here's a guy who just has a ton of question marks, right? He's 28. He's obviously young enough. You have him under control as far as a contract for a number of years, but here's a guy that you're looking to try to get some cap relief, and this guy's his base salary is like $20 million a year, not before roster bonuses and anything like that. Same thing with Matthew Stafford, believe it or not. I think his base salary for this year is like $12 million or $10 million or whatever it is, but his roster bonus is another $10 million, so that's $20 million right there. So you're not really going to gain much relief from either one of those guys financially. And are you really confident that either one of them can be the leader of your team? I'm certainly not, based on what they've done for their respective teams. I'm not confident either one of those guys. I mean, I know they're both talented, and they've showed some flashes in the past, and they've had some good years, and they put up some good numbers. But when push comes to shove, they haven't produced in the postseason. I realize a player like Wentz, a lot of that has to do with his health, but still, a quarterback that has had a history with that, at this point of his career. I realize, Ben has had some problems, but not like Wentz has had. I don't think not through the first 5 years of his career. So, and of course, the other guy that people are clamoring for is Deshaun Watson. And I just read on Yahoo before I came on the show that his team, the Texans, aren't going to honor his request for a trade. And guess what? I don't blame them, because they'd be idiots to trade Deshaun Watson. I don't care how much he says he wants traded. The guy is going to be making $40 million in 2022. He's not going to walk away from the NFL if he doesn't get traded from the Texans. A few conversations, a few personnel moves, and he'll likely be feeling good about things again. That's usually how it works in sports. When you got a guy like that who's 25 years old, who's in the prime of his career, maybe hasn't even hit the prime of his career, you do whatever you can to make things work with that guy. You don't suddenly get rid of him. That would just be idiotic. So, those guys, I don't think any of those guys I just mentioned are realistic. I don't think Mason Rudolph's the answer yet. Obviously, I'm not confident in Dwayne Haskins. Ben's the guy right now, as far as I'm concerned. As far as who can lead them to on a playoff run, whether you think, whatever you think their ceiling is for 2021, whether you think it's a Super Bowl title or one and done, whatever you think that ceiling is, Ben has the best chance of getting them there. So I'm not ready to move on from him. And I'm glad that they're publicly, both parties are publicly talking about coming to a compromise for 2021. So that's my first topic. Let's see, we have any comments as I was rambling on. Here's one from Chad Landsman from Facebook. And he says, what do you want Ben to play for 5 years? Because they have bad quarterbacks. You rebuild like the Steelers did in the 1970s. Thank you, Chad. Because that's a nice segue into my next topic. Because why do you care about whether or not they rebuild next year? Why are you, when I say you, not just you, Chad, but a lot of people, why are you so eager to see them rebuild? Because guess what? Once a team starts to rebuild, the rebuilding might never stop. If you're listening on one of the audio platforms, I'm wearing a Pirate shirt, and if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, you can see them wearing a Pirate shirt. I'm a big-time Pirates fan. I'm a long-suffering Pirates fan, and with the exception of maybe 5 years since I was about 12 years old, they've been rebuilding, and the rebuilding never seems to stop. And I realize it's a completely different system in Major League Baseball. I actually wrote about this a week or so ago about how, the markets that were represented in the conference title games, you would never see that in the baseball playoffs, because it's the haves and the have-nots in baseball, whereas the NFL is a league of parity, and small market teams can thrive. So I realize it's a different system, but you never know. You never know what can happen to a team when it falls under when it hits a rough patch. I mean, you might think, the rebuilding will take 2 or 3 years, but it might take 15 years. And is this really the kind of team that you need to blow up and rebuild? I mean, this is a defense that maybe hasn't even reached its peak yet. It's a defense that they just rebuilt into an elite unit, one that has led the NFL in sacks for like a half a decade. Now it's taking the football away. Now it has a pretty elite secondary. Obviously, the line's always been solid. The linebackers are spectacular. At least T.J. Watt and Devin Bush, or T.J. Watt is. Devin Bush has a chance to be, and obviously Bud Dupree's probably gone, but Alex Highsmith has showed some promise in his rookie year. So this is a pretty elite defense. So can you really even rebuild if you wanted to? Can you blow it up? Even if you tried to rebuild, it might not be any better than 8-8 or 7-9. Is that good enough to get you the kind of draft pick you want? No. I mean, they were without Ben 2 years ago, and they almost made the playoffs because their overall talent on their roster, especially on their defense, was so good that it almost got them into the playoffs. So is this really a team you can blow things up with? I don't think it is. I think there's even when they make their free agent decisions on people like Juju and of course Mike Hilton and those guys, it's still going to be a pretty good roster. So why wouldn't you want to have your best option at quarterback to get you through, even if it's just one more year? I think if you have a chance to compete, you compete. You never know what can happen when you make it to the playoffs. I realize that their last couple of trips anyway have been disastrous, and their last 3 playoff games have been they've been blown out. They've been bullied. They've been kicked around. If you go back to the AFC title game following the 2016 season, but I think if you're a fan, you should want that rebuilding to be delayed for as long as possible. And if you don't want to buy into the whole Pirates small market thing from baseball, just the franchise quarterback thing. I mean, just look around. Look at the history. Look what the Dolphins have been going through since Dan Marino retired over 20 years ago. The Broncos, right? I mean, John Elway had to go out and get Peyton Manning because his attempt at getting a young quarterback in the first round, Tim Tebow, was such I hate to say disaster because he actually was a phenom, at least a media phenom, or at least a media sensation, but he wasn't the answer. So he had to go out and get Peyton Manning, who was 36, 37, right? They still haven't found that guy. They've got guys like Brian Greasy and Jake Plummer and you name it. Now they're going with Drew Lock. They're still trying to find that answer. So who else? The 49ers since Steve Young, they got lucky. They had Joe Montana, and then they I don't know if they got lucky because they went out and traded for Steve Young when Montana was still there, but they got lucky in that Steve Young actually fulfilled his potential or reached his potential and won him another Super Bowl. But they've gotten back to a couple since the Steve Young era with Kaepernick and with Garoppolo, but they obviously haven't won it. And who knows, their quarterback situation seems to be up in the air again. Garoppolo, he showed a lot of promise his first couple of years in San Francisco. Now people are talking about them moving on from him and bringing in guys like Carson Wentz and Stafford. So, once you move on from Ben, once you move on from that guy, the chances are it's going to be a lot. It's not just going to be 1 or 2 lean years. It's going to be a lot of lean years. So to me, sports are entertainment, and I'm not looking to blow things up just because I'm weary of the players that they have now. I'm not weary of these players. I'm not eager to see fresh blood at the quarterback position. I want to see them continue on with Ben until he absolutely can't play anymore, because once he's gone, then things are going to look pretty bad as far as, in my opinion, more than likely. So on that happy note, I will this brings to a close the first half of this episode of the Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. If you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, don't go anywhere. If you're listening on one of the audio platforms, please download part 2 of this episode of the Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking with me in the live show, and thank you for downloading part 2 if you've done that. I appreciate the support. Let's see. Here's one from. I'm going to take care of some comments while I have the chance before I get on to my next topic. Here's one from Thomas Ellie. BTS Steelers Radio. I guess that's me. I personally don't see Ben Roethlisberger going anywhere in the near future, although some people are still telling me he's done. Pittsburgh Steelers, Steeler Nation, hashtag. Yeah, I think a lot of it is people react to the last thing that they see, right? Or the last thing that they saw. And, when the Steelers were 11-0 and Ben looked like an MVP candidate, people were all on board with him, or at least they mostly were. But, they're reacting to that 1-5 finish. I don't really consider 1-5. I more like 1-4. That game against Cleveland in Week 17 when they were resting people, I don't count that game. I mean, I really don't. I know it counts in the standings, but they lost 4 out of the last 5 games that meant anything. So people are reacting to that. So, they got rid of Fickner, but that's not enough. Now people want them to move on from Ben. But I don't. As I said last week, or maybe I didn't talk about this last week. I thought about this last week. I can't remember if I talked about it on the podcast, but I'm interested to see how Ben reacts to a normal off season of workouts and getting his body ready for an upcoming season, and instead of him doing strenuous rehab and maybe doing things they normally wouldn't do in the off season because he's rehabbing from a major surgery, a major injury. So maybe in that regard, maybe if he has a normal off season with OTAs as normal as they can be nowadays, and a mini camp and a full training camp at St. Vincent, maybe they'll have it at St. Vincent this year. Maybe that's enough to get him back to his old self, and maybe he starts feeling like his old self again. I think people have to remember, you're coming off a major surgery. Perhaps it takes you a little longer than you think to get back to 100% or get back to your old form. And by the way, and I was reading a lot of comments today on the site. I think it was Dave Schofield's article about the Steelers and how they may go about restructuring deals and in the future. And a lot of people just keep referring to Ben as having a lack of dedication and being this beer swigging 250-pound quarterback who doesn't care. The guy got himself into the greatest shape that he's been in probably over a decade last offseason. I mean, people, did you forget that already? Already you're falling back into these old narratives because you're angry how the season ended. He got himself into the best shape probably since he was in his late 20s, maybe even before that last offseason. So the question is dedication after that, I think is a bit unfair. So if he decides that he's going to come back next year, which I think he's probably 80-20 that he's going to come back, then he's going to get himself into the best shape possible, just like he did last year. Why wouldn't he? I mean, if he wants it bad enough, then he's going to try to, you saw those tears on the sideline at the end of that Cleveland wildcard game. The guy clearly cares. Maybe he cares now more than he ever did. Maybe he took it for granted when he was in his 20s winning Super Bowls. Whereas now, at the age of almost 39, he realizes how hard it is to compete and get back to a Super Bowl and win a title. So now maybe he doesn't take those things for granted anymore, and he's going to work to get himself into the best shape possible. And he sees other examples of guys that are older than him, guys like Drew Brees and, of course, Tom Brady, who are in their 40s and they're still in great shape. And at least in Brady's case, he's still having great success. So the whole thing about Ben not being dedicated, I mean, that seemed to disappear when they were in the middle of their 11-game winning streak. But now all of a sudden it's back again because he struggled down the stretch. And people point to him taking Wednesdays off. Like, that really matters all that much. Excuse me. I think that stuff's all overblown. A guy who's played as many football games as him, I don't think having a Veterans Day off in the middle of the week is going to affect his game. I just don't. It's just me. But that brings me to my last topic before I start taking some questions, and it has to do again with Art II and that Dave Schofield article I referenced, and how Art Rooney said that the team might have to look into how they structure contracts and restructure contracts in the future. And that didn't really surprise me, because I think they were in a pretty unique situation when they started doing that in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I mean, that was their second best era in franchise history. They went to 3 Super Bowls in 6 years and however many AFC Championship games. They were a solid, legit juggernaut, right? They were a juggernaut. So, in the salary cap era, they never had to deal with these kind of contracts. Before Ben came along and before they started having success like that, they would more often than not let players reach the final year of their rookie deals and let them leave, and they would replenish through the draft. Well, once you start having the kind of success that they did, and the support grows, and I think the fan support grew even more during that second Super Bowl era than it did during the 70s, because, you have social media and you have, you're aware that it's not just Steeler Nation, it's Steeler Universe, and it's a worldwide team, and they're followed everywhere, as Mark Davison and Matty Pepperall are great examples of. They're huge diehard fans over in Australia, So I think they changed their philosophy, and they wanted to keep that team together as long as they could. So you would sign maybe a decade or so earlier. Maybe you don't sign a James Harrison to the kind of deal that they did, or a Lamar Woodley, or a Polamalu, or players like that. If you want to compare Polamalu to another all-time great, Rod Woodson, they kind of let him walk after Super Bowl 30 a year later, when he went into free agency, and that was it. Dan Rooney said it was one of the biggest regrets of his career, letting Rod Woodson go. Well, maybe they didn't want to make that same mistake with Polamalu or Ike Taylor, who they also signed to a pretty lucrative deal for him anyway, for his level of play. So, and they had a franchise quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. When you have a guy like that in your organization, you want to try to keep that your team as strong and competitive as possible. So maybe you go around, you kick the can down the road, and you sign players to deals that maybe you wouldn't have in the past. But once Ben does move on, maybe they go back to their old philosophy of letting players walk after free agency and not getting saddled with huge contracts and big all this guaranteed money, and maybe you continue to try to replenish through the draft. So I'm not surprised that Art II said that they might have to change the way they structure deals in the future, because I always expected they would anyway, or suspected that they would, once Ben finally does move on. So those are my topics for tonight, and I will take some time and answer some questions and highlight some comments. So let's see what you guys have. Here's one from Logan DiLorenzo. If you have a rookie quarterback, TJ's contract, meaning TJ Watt, won't be bad. Yeah. Well, they're supposed to, I think, starting in 2022, they're going to have a lot more cap space. Of course, there'll be a lot less players under contract too. They're going to have to get a lot of players under contract, to fill out the 53-man roster. But you're right. If they have a rookie contract, then, a player like Watt and what he's going to command, which I think is going to be along the lines of what Aaron Donald got, which I think is around $125 million over 5 years, it won't be so bad. And, the conventional wisdom now is that your best time to win Super Bowls is when your quarterback's on his rookie deal, because you don't have to pay out that the kind of money that he's going to want in the second and third contracts, which we've seen with Ben. The Chiefs, they're still kind of in that rookie phase with Patrick Mahomes, even though they gave him a mega deal last year. But once he gets into the meat of that deal, the heart of that deal, things might be different for him and for them, as far as being competitive and being able to compete for a Super Bowl. So you might be right. Here's one from Bill Davis. Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are both playing in the Super Bowl. They are, but that stuff doesn't bother me that much. I know a lot of people were upset about that, but I think if they were both major players for their teams and they were difference makers, then maybe I'd be like, oh man, that sucks. But I mean, these they're bit players. I'm not even sure if either one of those guys will even play in the game. So, if they win, whoever winds winds up winning the ring, I mean, good for them. They both had nice careers, especially Brown. Maybe they deserve to go out with a ring, but they didn't. Them winning it this way isn't nearly as infuriating as it would be, say if Brown went to, how he forced his way out of Pittsburgh 2 years ago. If he would have won it with the Raiders and Derek Carr, who he claimed he showed a lot of love too early on before turning his back on him and the organization before training camp was even over. So I think that would be more infuriating than the way it is now. The way I look at it now, these guys are extras in a movie. Whereas somebody like Big Ben, the three of them had their issues with each other. So it's like a saga between the three of them. Big Ben's more like that A-list actor that missed out on a big part, but he still gets to be an A-list actor. Whereas these guys, even if they win a ring, is it going to be satisfying to them? Probably not, because they didn't get to do it when they weren't major players in helping their team win. So I don't really care about all that. Here's one from Frank Crooker. Ben chokes in the playoffs. Bradshaw was just money in the playoffs. Well, Bradshaw, I did a retro show with Brian Anthony Davis. I think the last one we did, Super Bowl 13. He won MVP of that game, but he turned the ball over 3 times in the first, I think, 20 minutes of the game, and 2 of them led to touchdowns for the Cowboys. So, I think people focus on Ben choking in the playoffs, but he didn't choke in Super Bowl 43. I mean, was that a choke? Did he choke against the Ravens when he led Pittsburgh back from they were down 21-7 in that divisional round game? When they were on their way to Super Bowl 45, did he choke then? Did he choke against the Bengals a few years ago in that wild card game when he had help from Vontaze Burfict, don't get me wrong, and Pac-Man Jones, but he led them, most of the way down the field for a game-winning field goal with a bad shoulder. So the whole Ben chokes in the playoff thing, he's taken them to 3 Super Bowls. I mean, I don't know how you can choke in the playoffs if you do that. I think that's just a bunch of BS. Bradshaw was great, but he also had his struggles. Let's not pretend that he carried the Pittsburgh Steelers to 4 Super Bowls. He had a lot of help, as did Ben. So let's not go there. Bradshaw was never shy about turning the football over, and even in big games. He can make big plays in big games, but he also turned the ball over in big games too. Here's a super chat that I missed for $4.99 from Evgeny Crosby. I love that name. I wonder what he means by that. Anyway, he says Ben Roethlisberger went 33-10 a year after major elbow surgery. He of course means he threw 33 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, and that's right. That's why I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. We don't know how much of his struggles last year had to do with fatigue on his part, or the line and the struggles with the offensive line, or the offensive coordinator. So we might get to find out about all of that this offseason. They promoted Matt Canada to coordinator. They're going to obviously try to retool the line, and we're going to see how Ben responds to a normal offseason after coming back from major elbow surgery. So he still had a really good year, and people forget that he was a MVP candidate, at least in our minds, at one point in the season. I'm not ready to write him off yet just because of how the season finished out. Here's one from no one you know. Well, I don't really know anybody, but other than your live chat personas, but that's a great name. I'd say the team chokes in the playoffs, not Ben. Again, though, I hate to say that. I hate to use the word choke in the playoffs because that implies that these guys just mentally don't have what it takes to get the job done. And I think more often than not, what happens is they just don't have what it takes from a talent standpoint to get the job done. And the other team was just better than them. It's a lot easier to say a team choked. It's an intangible. It's use that as an excuse than it is to say, well, the other team was just better. Like that 2017 Jaguars team that actually beat up the Steelers twice. They beat them up in the regular season. All right, people are like, all right. And then it happens again in the playoffs, and people are like, what? Well, they overlooked them. No, it was just a bad matchup. I think, I wouldn't say these guys choke in the playoffs. I think they just haven't had the team to get it done over the last decade overall. And that happens, it happens to it's not easy to unless you're Tom Brady, it's not easy to get to the Super Bowl. I think history bears that out. Here's one from Guy Rowe. How many first-round picks did the Steelers use on a quarterback between Bradshaw and Ben? Well, they drafted Mark Malone in 1980 when Bradshaw was still here, right after their fourth Super Bowl. But other than him, and they should have known he wasn't the answer by 83 because 83 was his 80, 81, 82. It was his fourth year in the league. And that was the year that Bradshaw was having trouble coming back from his major elbow surgery in the offseason. And Mark Malone couldn't even beat out Cliff Stout for the starting job that year, 1983. So they should have known that he wasn't the answer, but they held on to him for another 5 years. And really, they didn't invest in the quarterback position that strongly between Bradshaw and Ben. I mean, obviously, other than Malone. But I think I misunderstood your question a little bit. You said between Bradshaw and Ben, how many first round quarterbacks? None. I mean, they tried their hand with Bubby Brister, obviously Malone, I mentioned, Neil O'Donnell, and they were some were better than others. I think Neil O'Donnell gets criticized far too much because of what happened in Super Bowl 30, and fans are never going to forget that. But he was a nice quarterback when he was here. Cordell had his moments. You know, he took him to 2 AFC title games. Tommy Maddox had a nice run, but they didn't really invest in the quarterback position in the first round from the time Bradshaw retired until they did so with Big Ben. And as I've said a few times in the past, I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. I think when Ben does retire, whether it's in the next week or in a year or two, they're going to they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round. Maybe not right away, but eventually, within a couple of years, they're going to learn from that from those 20 years between Bradshaw and Ben. They didn't invest highly in the quarterback position, and look what happened. It took them 20 years to get back to being a Super Bowl contender again, a true Super Bowl, not a contender. They were a contender, but to win another Super Bowl. So it took them 20 years. I don't think it's going to take them 20 years again. Here's one from Thaddeus Kennedy. I like this question. Tony, any chance Spillane starts next season? Yeah, I think there's a great chance because I think, one of the casualties might be Vince Williams. Obviously Devin Bush is coming back, but they found out a lot about Robert Spillane and Devin Bush's absence. They found out that they might have a player, a better athlete than they thought, certainly a better athlete than guys like Vince Williams and Avery Williamson, a guy who maybe has some upside, more upside than they thought. A guy who can give them more speed alongside Bush. A guy who's more capable in pass coverage than Williams and Williamson were, and guys like that. So there's a great chance that he starts. I think. I mean, it's a shame that he got hurt at the end of the year because they could have used him. But I think his future looks bright. We'll see. I mean, we've seen players like that, undrafted free agents, have a nice little run in the NFL and then kind of fade away. But, we've also seen guys get a chance like him and have 10-year careers. So I think there's a good chance that he's going to start next year. So we'll see. There's a lot of, as Art II said, there's a lot of work to be done financially for this team. So he might benefit from that work that they have to do if they have to move on from Vince Williams. Well, Frank Crooker says Terry 4 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs, and 1 NFL MVP. Nothing more needs to be said. Not even close. Yeah, he was a great big time quarterback, but my point was he also made a lot of mistakes. People highlight the mistakes or highlight the good points because they never lost any of those games, but he made a lot of mistakes in those Super Bowls. And he was fortunate to win, they were fortunate to win some of those Super Bowls because I shouldn't say fortunate. They had such a great team that they were able to absorb Bradshaw's mistakes. I mean, he fumbled, he threw interceptions, he threw the guys that I watched that Super Bowl 13 game the other day. He threw a first quarter pick to D.D. Lewis, which was no different than what O'Donnell threw to Larry Brown in Super Bowl 30. So, Bradshaw was, he was a great player. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but to talk about Ben's turnovers in the postseason and not mention Bradshaw's, I think that's disingenuous. Bradshaw had a better team around than Ben did. But and people have to remember, Bradshaw struggled a lot, especially the first half of his career. He really struggled to get things down. Ben was much further along than Bradshaw was over the first 5-6 years of his career. So we can't, if you're going to boil everything down to Super Bowls and nothing else, then I guess that 70s team was the only team that matters, because they're the only team that won 4 and didn't lose any. Here's one from Gyro. Terry also had how many Hall of Famers on his team? He's the top 15 quarterback ever, but man, he had a better team than Ben ever did. That's right. I mean, you can't just open and shut every case with 4 Super Bowls and that's it. It was a different era. Terry had got to keep his team around him much longer than Ben did. Ben played in the salary cap era, always transitioning, always roster turnovers, right? Or a turnover. So, it's almost like apples and oranges in a way. Here's one from let's see where I missed it. Andrew Herman. T, I guess that means me, Tony. When was the last time Stafford had a team? Well, I mean, he had a couple of decent teams, but never had a great team. But Matthew Stafford's going to be 33 in a week. I looked it up before I came on the show. He'll be 33. Is he somebody you want to invest in at this point, right? Heading into his mid 30s. You're talking about moving on from a guy who's 38, and now you're going to throw a lot of money at a 33-year-old. I mean, it's funny how people talk. I mean, on one hand, people are saying, well, let Ben go and rebuild. And then they're saying, well, bring in this 33-year-old quarterback, so which one is it going to be? I think they're closer to being I think they're still a contender. I don't think they have to rebuild, but I think, if you're going to move on from Ben, you put a young guy in there and let him grow with the team and let that defense carry him for a couple of years, like they kind of did with Ben. They didn't totally carry Ben. He was the difference maker, but he certainly benefited from not having to carry the load his first couple of years. Here's one from Logan DiLorenzo. Maybe better for his time, meaning Bradshaw, but he is not better. If you put Terry and now in his prime, his arm wouldn't be strong. Oh, well, strong enough. He wouldn't be that good. Terry was a super talent. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Terry Bradshaw because he threw some interception. I was more defending Ben than trying to criticize Bradshaw. I don't want to, because the West Coast offense didn't really exist in the 70s, or at least in Bradshaw's heyday. So, if you look at a lot of great quarterbacks from those eras, they turned the ball over a lot. It's just how it was. They had to take more chances downfield. So I don't want to discredit Terry. He had a phenomenal arm. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. He had a great arm, maybe one of the greatest arms ever, and he was a phenomenal athlete. I watched the 79 AFC title game. It was in 80, the last one of the 70s, and he ran for 25 yards on one play, and he looked like a freaking running back. Myron Cope said many times he was the fastest time player on the team for many years. He was an exceptional athlete. So I don't want to discredit Terry Bradshaw. If you put him on this team today, or if you put him on those, I think if you put Big Ben in that era with those teams, they still have the same kind of success. And if you put Terry on the 2000 Steelers and the 2010 Steelers, they still have that same kind of success. I think they're both great players, but to say Ben choked in the playoffs because he throws a bunch of picks and not acknowledge that Terry also turned the ball over a ton, I think that's not fair. Here's one from Cecil Music. This is great. It's like a retro show. We're talking about Terry Bradshaw. Terry said the defense was so good that he knew he really only needed to make 3 or 4 big throws. Yeah. Well, and to Bradshaw's defense, if you look at one of the most important stats in football, yards per attempt, I mean, his always went up in the big. I mean, he always had a healthy number in the regular season, but when the playoffs kicked in, he took it to a whole other gear. I think I researched this one year, and I think in like 1 year he was like 11 yards per attempt, which is crazy. So here's one from Jared Devil. Ben will be just fine with a retold line and a good running back. I'm not worried. Yeah, well, I think they're going to address those areas. I think they realize they have to address the offensive line. It needs work. It needs to be upgraded, at least a couple of spots. And of course, running back. I don't think they're going to draft one in the first round. I think they can wait till the second round, but you never know. So I think maybe they'll find something in free agency too. Who knows? Mark Davidson, who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl, Chiefs or Bucks? I don't really have a preference. I mean, the newness of the Chiefs winning it has worn off. I mean, I think they've gone from you'd like to see this team win it for the first time since 1969, and to all right, they're a juggernaut now. They're not an underdog anymore. So either one, I think either one would be a great story. I think if Mahomes beats out Brady, it's like a sort of a passing of the torch. Although we said that before with Brady, but if Brady wins after going to the Buccaneers, 43 years old, if he goes out and he beats the new face of the league, if he beats the guy that's trying to take his place, that would be a great story too. So I really don't have a preference. I just want to see a great game. I just think it's funny that it's in Tampa this year, and they're in Tampa, but it's so people think, oh, they finally broke the host city jinx, but it's during a pandemic and the stadium won't be full. So really, is it going to be much of an advantage for the Bucs other than the fact that they're playing in their home stadium? Travel won't be an issue because the Chiefs are going down like all Super Bowl teams do, a week early. So they're not going to be fatigued from travel or anything like that. So the one time a team finally gets to play in the Super Bowl in its home stadium, it's during a pandemic with there'll be like 7,500 people there. So I just think that's funny. I just want to see a good game, which I'm pretty confident I will, because I think the Buccaneers, it's all Brady this and Brady that in that offense, but that defense is phenomenal. I mean, they have great linebackers. They have great pass rush. That's a great defense, and Devin White is the real deal. So hopefully Devin Bush gets to come back and join his fellow Devin as a havoc-wreaking inside linebacker in the NFL, because Devin White is exceptional. So I'm looking forward to this game. I don't know how the Bucs are going to, even that defense, I don't know how they're going to slow the Chiefs down, but I'm looking forward to that game. So, and on that note, I think I'm going to call it a night. I've rambled on for 53 minutes. That's pretty long for a Friday night. It's almost 10 o'clock. I got to get my shut-eye for work tomorrow. But it was great talking to you guys tonight. And if you're listening on the audio platform, thank you for downloading both halves of the show. And you have a nice weekend, everybody. And I will talk to you on Monday with Brian Anthony Davis on The Hangover. And until then, go Steelers. Good night, everybody.